Let us see in this video the top 10 bizarre year additions. Number 10, dueling. Dueling is an old custom in Western societies. A duel would involve two men who would face off in an open field and fire a single shot at each other. Duels were often fought over matters of principle and honor. In earlier years, duels were fought with swords in a one on one scenario. It was considered dishonorable for a man to refuse a duel, and eventually the concept of was condemned by the dominant Christian religions as it almost always lead to death. Number 9, concubinage. A concubinage was a person who was put into a quasi matrimonial state which a man of higher status. The man would often have more than one concubine, and they were regarded as lower in the social order than his wife and children. It was often a voluntary state as it ensured economic security for life. Some extreme cases of concubinage involved sexual slavery. Number 8, geisha. The original geisha were highly trained women who were educated in the arts, dancing, conversation, and music. They were extremely skilled and would perform the role of an escort for gentlemen. They were not prostitutes, and for many of the girls, this was a way to secure a living when they had no hopes of otherwise escaping a life of poverty. The modern geisha are not trained in quite as rigorous a manner. So, man of the original traditions have been lost. It is now entirely a voluntary way of life, whereas in the past, many girls were forced to train as geisha. Number 7, foot binding. Foot binding is a custom that began in China in the 10th century and continued right up to the early 20th century. Young girls, usually from the age of 6, would have their feet bound so tightly that as they grew older, their bones would break, keeping the foot small and delicate. Sometimes the parent intentionally broke the girl's toes in order to facilitate the process. The practice of foot binding was usually found in upper class families who had enough servants to perform the menial tasks that lower class women had to perform themselves. This is a foot binding which occurs usually it started in China. So number 6, self self mummification. In northern Japan, a group of Buddhist monks called Shokusbutsu practiced a very extreme form of self-denial that ended in death. For 3 years, a monk would prepare himself for death by drinking a special type of liquor while undergoing extreme physical exercise and strict dieting in order to reduce body fat. When the monk was ready for death, he would be sealed in a tomb not much bigger than himself and would remain there until he died. The liquor that he had been drinking would stop his body from decomposing, thereby thereby mummifying him. Between 16 and 24 self-mummified bodies exist today. Number 5, eunuchs. Eunuchs were men who were castrated in order to fulfill certain roles in society. Castration was used as a punishment in China and also as a means of getting a job at the royal palace. Some eunuchs wielded an extreme amount of power. Some eunuchs were castrated before puberty in order to ensure that their voices would not break, enabling them to sing high soprano roles in opera and in choirs. The boys were given no choice, and the procedure rendered them unable to have children. It was not until 1912 that the role of the eunuch ended. Number 4. Sati. Sati is an old Hindu custom, unfortunately still occasionally practiced today, in which the wife of a recently deceased man is expected to jump onto his funeral pyre to be burned alive, thereby joining him in death. In many cases, if the wife would not comply, the family of the husband and even other members of the village would throw her into the fire. Sati was particularly common among women with no children, as they would often have no source of income for the rest of their lives. Number 3. Seppuku. Seppuku was a part of the samurai code of honor. It involved stabbing oneself in the abdomen with a left to right cut. Once the warrior had cut himself, the helper, called Kaishakunin, would cut off his head with a sword to prevent undue suffering. Prior to this ritual suicide, the samurai would write a death poem. Number 2. Human sacrifice. As long as there have been humans, there have been human sacrifices. Originally, the sacrifice was intertwined with paganism, and various groups around the world, independently of each other, practiced it. Sometimes young children or babies were killed in the hopes that their innocence would make the sacrifice more worthy. Some methods of sacrifice were especially bizarre, as was the case of the Vestal virgins of ancient Rome, who were entombed until dead. Number 1. Tibetan sky burial. Tibetan sky burial is the method of a burial preferred by Tibetan Buddhists. It involves the crushing of a corpse with a variety of hammers and mallets. The bones are powdered, and the resulting mixture is combined with the barley flour, tea, and yak butter. The remains are then thrown to vultures that consume the entire body. The Buddhists believe that this is the most natural way to rid the earth of an otherwise empty shell, because they believe that the soul will be reincarnated. So, these are the top 10 bizarre traditions we have.